All right. So, good morning to all of you. Welcome to a somewhat cloudy Thursday. I received lots of papers last night, so thank you for sending those. And I guess I have my work cut out for me now to try to get them all graded and back to you as quickly as I possibly can, which I will do. Yeah. So who's here? So Michaela's here. Good morning, Michaela, wherever you are. Good morning, Ananda. I know they're here in spirit. They're here in spirit. Ananda's here. Good morning to you. Ty's here. Good morning, and Hadil is here. Good morning, Hadil. Yesterday, let me see here. Yesterday we were talking about this guy. Still, we finished watching our documentary, which it was kind of half biography and half kind of an exploration of how he comes to power, right? And so we got a sense of a little bit who he was, and one of the things I think I'm trying to drive home here is the fact that he's a pretty consistent character all the way through his rise to power. So when he first kind of takes control of the Nazi Party or the German Workers' Party, all the way until he becomes Führer and starts kind of reorganizing Germany in pretty significant ways. He's never really made a secret about his views or what he wants to do. And so, maybe it shouldn't be a shock to us that he kind of does what he says he's going to do. And the question is why does anyone go along with this, right? Why does anyone, why is he allowed to sort of gain the power that he gains, given the fact that he has these pretty radical views in terms of society, in terms of in Germany's role in Europe, what to do with ethnic minorities in Germany and Jewish people. And so again, none of that is really a secret from day one, and yet somehow he gets the keys to Germany anyway, right? Ayushi's here, so good morning to Ayushi. So yesterday, you'll recall I asked you to read a reasonable chunk of the textbook. Can I give you about 6 minutes just to sort of look over that and finish your answers so we can talk about it? So we can talk about it in a few minutes? Cool. Okay. So online people, you'll remember that this is posted in Microsoft Teams under Files, so you can find it there. And I will put 6 minutes on the clock. I will say good morning to Shania, who's here. Good morning, Shania. And then I'll just give you a few minutes to look over that section again, finish those questions so we can chat, okay? Okay, good people. Let's talk about these. So remind me again, what is this new order? What is this new order thing that Hitler is talking about? He's not talking about the band from the 80s. What's he talking about? Does anyone know New Order? New Order? Nobody knows that band from the 80s? Have you heard in the new Wonder Woman movie, you know that song that plays in the trailer, that kind of electric song? Yeah. Yeah, that's New Order. That's Blue Monday. Yeah. Anyway, not New Order from the 80s. Hitler's New Order. What is Hitler's New Order about? So economic autarky, not a turkey, but autarky. I know that's not a funny joke, but I'm going to keep saying it anyway. Autarky, right? So he wants Germany to be economically self-sufficient. What else does he want? What does he want? He what? He wants back his stuff, right? Germany had some things confiscated from it in the Treaty of Versailles. He wants it back. What does he want back? Land, right? Where is this land? The Rhineland. Austria, right? The Polish corridor, the Sudetenland, as they call it. So that's the part of Czechoslovakia that Hitler wants back, right? So Germany had some stuff taken. Hitler wants it back. What else is part of his new order? Yeah, what's the fancy word? Rearmament, right? So he wants to rearm Germany, and he goes ahead and starts to do it. What else? What else is he going to do? Economic self-sufficiency. He wants to take over some territories that have been taken from Germany in the Treaty of Versailles. What does that have to do? There was a German word. It was the land. It was connected to his plan. Living space. What's the German word for that? Ooh, you're so close. Try it again. Lebensraum, right? So living space. It almost sounds like living room, if you will. Lebensraum, living space. And so there we go. Ayushi was quick on the trigger there. So Hitler has this idea that the Germans need living space, that he wants to give every German citizen a piece of land to call their own. And unfortunately for other people in Europe, that's going to mean that Germany is going to take that land away from them, right? Michaela here says, yeah, he has plans for racial purity, right? So he wants kind of greater Germany, or Germany proper, to be reserved for ethnic Germans, right? People of German blood, if you will. And basically everyone else is going to have to go away. Yeah, somehow. Yeah, they're going to have to go away, right? So at first there are plans to just kind of deport everyone. And so just kind of round up everyone who's not German and kick them out of Germany. Of course, as we know, that's going to take a darker turn, right? And they're going to find another solution to that problem. But yeah, he has a very clear idea of how society is going to be structured along racial or ethnic lines, right? And I want to take you back to, remember when we looked at the political spectrum? And I said that, people on the right side were, the government was very involved in people's social lives. And this is one of the ways in which Hitler is very right-wing. He's very interested in the ethnic makeup of his country, right? He's very interested in making sure that Germany is for Germans, right? People on the left wing don't care so much about that. Usually, people on the left wing are usually more accepting of diversity. Here we can see a very extreme example of someone who is not at all accepting of diversity, right? What else? Other elements of his new order. Oh yeah, he's got his own Boy Scout troop and Girl Scout troop. And what's the purpose of the Hitler Youth? Yeah, they're being trained for a number of things. They're being trained in some military tactics, even from a young age. That's a little scary. What else are they being trained in, or what else are they being taught? Yeah, how to play drums, which of course was a part of military training back in the day. Right nowadays, our SWAT teams don't learn to play drums. But do you know why that is? Yeah, the drums I think were in part to keep people synchronized, right? So the army would march in a sort of a coordinated fashion and they wouldn't sort of break up, I believe. I think that's so, if you go back to, like warfare from the 1800s and the Victorian times, yeah, they'd have a drummer there and the drummer would, help keep the army together in a way. Obviously, we don't do that very much. There's no drummers in Call of Duty, is there? Can't play a drummer character? No. Yeah, we don't really do that anymore. But at the time in the 1920s and 30s, it was still kind of a traditional thing. And so, yeah, we saw some footage of the Hitler Youth playing drums. But what else are they taught? What else are these young people instructed in?
He was teaching them, I don't know, his ways, kind of like Nazi Germany.
Yeah, do you want to give that a fancy word? His ways? I'm think. Yeah. What were you going to say, B? Yeah, he's manipulating them for sure. Although you could classify all education as some sort of manipulation if you wanted, but yeah, he's educating them in his ideology, right? In his vision for Germany and what Germans should be, and he's kind of getting them to swear allegiance to him, right? So he's creating this very kind of fervent, passionate group of supporters in the Hitler Youth. What were you going to say, Ahmad? No? I think that was it. Was it not? Yeah. Okay. And so how is this kind of new order that Hitler has in mind, how is this going to affect the people of Europe? So what about the people outside of Germany currently? How's the Europe with Hitler's new order in effect? How's that going to look? What's that?
It was a threat to other people.
It was definitely a threat. What was so threatening about his plan? Right, so Germany was going to be an armed country again, and as we read about, it's going to be very well armed, or at least as well armed as Hitler can make it. What else is going to happen? How is Europe going to be kind of reorganized?
So there was something, they said something about this armament meeting, that Hitler doesn't like it, so he withdraws, and he also withdraws from the League of Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Then he orders a universal military training. So
R-
they just told him don't train anyone, then he says what's your next?
Right, so Hitler is, they're still kind of under the condition, they're supposed to be under the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, which limits Germans' military, the size of their military and their ability to train. There's disarmament talks going on. There's the League of Nations that might, attempt to apply pressure to Hitler, and Hitler says, "Forget it. I'm out of this stuff. I'm not going to listen to the Treaty of Versailles. We're leaving the League of Nations. We're, walking out of these disarmament talks because we want weapons that other people don't want us to have." And so, yeah, in some ways, he's kind of stepping back from whatever attempt at international cooperation is happening at the time. He is removing himself from it, and he's arming Germany. How does he think Europe is going to work economically with his new order?
So everyone will basically be slaves, and they'll just make him the raw material. Germany will be the industrial heartland, and everything.
Right. So he kind of has a vision, almost like a colonial vision of Europe, right? Where basically Germany is the head of Europe. All the other countries in Europe send their raw materials for manufacture, and then Germany will sell those materials back to them. And that's, again, that's kind of the colonial or the mercantilism kind of approach that colonial nations use. Hitler's just going to use it within Europe, right? But is that going to advantage Germany? Yeah. Is it going to disadvantage everyone else? Yeah. What are the roles of kind of different ethnicities in Germany? What do you get or what do you not get? Yeah, there is certainly no, there's no place for Jewish people in Hitler's Germany, right? Who else won't have a place? One second. B, what did you say? Polish people, right? Slavic people are out. Gypsies or Roma people are out. Ahmad, what we? Nordic?
Yeah, everyone who's not these two, we just work or die.
Right. So, and Shafan, what were you going to say? No? You good? Okay. So, yeah, basically rights, citizens' rights, voting rights, human rights basically are reserved for ethnic Germans, right? People of German blood. They mentioned that, you know, maybe some English people and Nordic people can continue to exist in Germany if they're needed and if they can work. But basically everyone else, yeah, Scandinavians, Michaela says, everyone else doesn't really have a place, right? And so they're going to be kicked out or deported or, you know, or executed later on, right? So again, he's got economic plans for Germany, but he's also got some social engineering plans as well. Okay, what's this Kristallnacht thing? That's number, oh no, sorry, I missed one. Nuremberg. What are these Nuremberg Decrees? What's Nuremberg, by the way? If you had to guess. It's a little German chocolate. No, it's not. It's what? It's a city. It's not a German chocolate. A Nuremberg is not a chocolate. It's a city, right? So in the city of Nuremberg, Hitler kind of announces these laws. They're decrees, right? Because the legislature doesn't have to vote on them because there's no democracy anymore. He's just saying what the laws are, right? And so what does he decree here in 1935? 35? 33? 33, I think. What does he decree? What's Nuremberg? They did what? Yeah, so the Nuremberg Decrees are seek to kind of separate out or isolate Jewish people from the rest of society. Does it mention exactly how it plans to do that?
I think they said that no German people have the right to get in contact with Jewish.
Right. So the laws are meant to legally ensure that there's no contact between Jewish people and Germans, right? Does it give any more detail than that? I have a little more detail for you. Right, so their ability to work is going to be restricted, right?
No property.
Right.
No rights.
Yeah, they're going to lose their ability to work and their ability to they're going to lose their basic rights in society.
And the slightest bit of interaction between German and Jewish was forbidden.
Right, there's no kind of, yeah, there's no contact at all. I think that's how I have a little more detail on that, but I'll give you that in a second. So what effect do you think this had on Jewish people in Germany and on Germans, these Nuremberg Decrees? Let's start with Jewish people. What's the effect, do you think?
I think they'll have no support.
Yeah, they have no support definitely from the government, but they also lose their ability to kind of exist in society, right? They have no power, they have no rights, their ability to work is restricted. If your ability to work is restricted, do you have any money? No, you don't have any money. And what starts to happen is Jewish people start to collect themselves. Later on, it will be enforced by the Nazis, but they start to collect themselves in ghettos, right? So they start to live in one place. And in part, this is because for safety, right? They start to live amongst each other because it's more safe. But also they start to live in poorer areas of town because that's all they can afford, right? Their ability to work has been restricted. How do you think that affected the German people or the German people's views of Jewish people? What's that? It's possible that they didn't from the start, right? So I mentioned that anti-Semitism was a very common feeling of the day. There was lots of prejudice against Jewish people in Germany already, right? So it's not just Hitler who doesn't like these people. There's lots of other people who don't like them as well. But what does it do? How can I state this? Let me see what Ayushi says. There's something I want to point out, but I don't know how to do it. So Ayushi says anyone who even spoke anything other than German were excluded from Germans. Yeah, so it's not only ethnic, it's not only sort of descent, but it's also kind of cultural, right? If you were a Polish speaker, I think they mentioned in the video yesterday that Hitler has prejudice against you, even if you are a Polish speaker, regardless of what your ethnicity is, right? I guess what I want to point out here is when the government sort of sanctions the different treatment of a minority, right? So if they allow or if they openly attack a minority, often it encourages the people to do the same, okay? And this is why it's a really bad thing when Donald Trump, for instance, says something racist, right? Because other racists in the country, in the US, hear his words and think, oh, well, if the President of the United States thinks this, it must be okay for me to think it too, right? And maybe it's okay for me to do something about it. So when the government actually sanctions or supports a prejudice, it allows people to sort of behave in a more prejudiced way, right? Because it legitimizes their views. And so if you have someone like Barack Obama who speaks out against racism, often racists will quiet down a little bit, right? But when somebody says something racist, someone like Trump, racists feel, oh, now my views are being supported, they're legitimate, they're sanctioned. And so you can imagine how the German public would have reacted when the German government is actively persecuting Jewish people. You probably wouldn't have found that the German people would have said, hey, stop doing this, this is wrong. Many of them would have actually increased their sort of discriminatory or racist or prejudicial behavior towards them. So things are starting to get really bad for Jewish people, right? Because as a result of the Nuremberg Decrees. But then there's this Kristallnacht thing. And so what happens on this Kristallnacht? It sounds pretty actually, but it's not. What is it? He's a 17-year-old assassinated Some guy? Okay. What was that? That's true, but there's some relevant information missing here. Who's the 17-year-old kid?
17-year-old Jewish, I think, assassinated a German politician.
Yeah.
So in retaliation, they rounded up a whole lot of Jewish in the shop.
Right. So a 17-year-old Jewish boy or young man assassinates a German diplomat, right? And so how's this go over with the Nazis? Yeah, not well, right? Things get really ugly. And so again, this is kind of mob justice or mob violence, but it's actually the state, it's the government participating in it, right? So what happens on this one night?
So they did burn a lot of Jewish stuff. They killed a lot of them, and they took away their right of assembly.
Right. So we have a night of kind of vandalism and violence, right? And so lots of Jewish shop windows are broken. Jewish businesses are burned. Some of them. We have some Jewish men murdered. How many of them are arrested? 26,000? 26,000 young men, Jewish men, arrested and sent to camps. No trial, by the way, just arrested and sent off. Lots of rapes, lots of beatings. What else happens? And so that's what happens that night, right? So it's the Kristallnacht is the night of broken glass, right? And it's Jewish shop windows that are broken by the Nazis, right? Not to mention all of the violence and sexual assault that happens as a result. But then what happens after? What happens after? Or as a result? What's that? Right. So who has to pay for all of this damage? Jewish people are fined. They're the ones who have to pay for the damage. Who caused the damage? The Nazis, right? The German government. So the Jewish people have to pay for all of the vandalism that has happened to them as a result of the government, right? Which is also awful. And then what about their rights? Or what additional restrictions? No what?
They couldn't assemble.
Right, so they lose this freedom to assemble. What else do they lose? Huh?
Did they have anything else?
Well, not much, but they lose a little more.
So it also said that all their wealth was confiscated?
Yeah.
They had to do that?
Right, so kind of their remaining wealth is confiscated, yeah. They're fined for all of the property damage that they didn't do. What about this here? Jews were now denied the use of all public facilities, including transportation, hospitals, and retirement homes. So, yeah, you want to take a bus to work? Sorry, that's a public service. You can't take the bus to work. Need to go to the hospital? Too bad, the hospital won't take you now. Want to send your kids to school? That's not happening either, right? So, not that public services are, as extensive as they are here in Canada, but still, Jewish people don't get to use those anymore, right? They're stripped of they're pretty quickly stripped of their wealth. They are becoming confined in these poor neighborhoods. They can't use hospitals or schools or public transportation. Their rights are taken away. 26,000 of them were just arrested and sent to a camp without trial. So again, things are getting pretty uncomfortable, right? And as you can see, as you read, lots of German Jews are fleeing the country at this point if they can, right? If they have the money and support, some of them are trying to get out. But of course, as the textbook points out, some of them don't quite make it, right? Either they don't have enough money to leave, or they can't leave, or they flee to Poland, let's say, and then Germany takes over Poland and they're right back under the Nazis again, right? So many Jews flee during this period, but many don't. And the other issue is that because of this because there's a pretty wide-ranging anti-Semitic prejudice at the time, many countries won't take Jewish immigrants. And so it's not that they don't leave, it's that they just don't have anywhere to go. One of the things that gets brought up in this regard is the St. Louis. And so the St. Louis is a ship, and it was full of Jewish refugees in the 1930s. I'm going to say it's 1938, but I might be wrong about that. So the St. Louis leaves, the ship leaves Europe and sails around trying to find a place to take in these Jewish refugees. And so they try a few countries. They try the US. The US says, no, we're not interested in any Jewish refugees. Try Canada. The ship comes to Canada. Canada says the same thing. Canada says, we're not interested in any Jewish refugees, and says, try somewhere else. Of course, there is nowhere else by that point, and they get sent back to Europe, and who knows what happens to them there.
So they said that some of them were sent to Palestine for $1,000.
If they had 1,000. So Palestine was taking, at the time, Palestine was taking Jewish immigrants, or Jewish refugees, I guess. Israel doesn't exist yet, right? So we just have this land called...
Just to go over to Palestine.
Yeah, they're allowed to go to Palestine, but they have to have $1,000 in their pocket.
Only rich people.
Yeah. So, and think about how much $1,000 is in 1930s money, right? Remember we were watching that documentary on America in the 20s. How much was a Ford Model T? $300 for a brand new car. Now that's in a country that was rich, right? The U.S. in the 1920s was rich. Now think about a Jewish person living in Germany having over three times that amount, and just having it in their pocket, like having it ready to go. So how many Jewish people do you think had $1,000 to go to Palestine? Only a few, right? Maybe the richest ones, or the ones that maybe got out early, right? The ones that saw things were going downhill. Maybe they were able to sell their business and get out before things got really bad. But yeah, do most of these Jewish people have $1,000? No. Heck no, right? Nobody has that kind of money at this time. So again, yeah, Palestine will take you if you've got tons of cash, which again, these people, especially after Nuremberg and after Kristallnacht, these people don't have any money, right? So they have nowhere to go. And again, Jewish refugees are often refused by other countries, specifically because of this anti-Semitism that they're trying to escape in Germany. So not only can they not leave, but they have nowhere to go. And people won't take them, and unfortunately, Canada is one of those countries that doesn't take them. Right. So we have Kristallnacht, and was the answer to number 6 in the section I asked you to read? I think it was, right? Yeah? Okay. So question 6 is about Britain and France failing to act against the resurgence of German power. So yeah, we know that Hitler was violating the Treaty of Versailles, right? They weren't supposed to nobody was supposed to occupy the Rhineland. And what does Hitler do? He occupies the Rhineland, right? Germany was not supposed to rearm. They were supposed to have a military of 100,000 people. What does Hitler do? He rearms them, right? So why is nobody holding him to account here? Why is nobody intervening?
I think they had the Munich Agreement, didn't they?
Was the Munich Agreement the one about Czechoslovakia? Yeah. So they did, right? So the first thing Hitler does is reoccupies the Rhineland, right? So he moves his military in there, even though it's supposed to be demilitarized. There's supposed to be no military in there. He moves them in, and what does everyone do? They sit and watch, right? They say, Hitler moves in and he says, oh, I hope, we can have peace. The Germans love peace. Let's all have peace, right? So he makes a very aggressive move, and then he convinces everyone that, oh, we just wanted this back. That's all. We're not looking for a fight. Everything's peaceful, right? And everyone believes him and goes along with it, right? Then he takes the Sudetenland in Poland, right? And so they have talks in Munich, right? And so the French president is there, whose name I cannot recall. The British Prime Minister is there, Neville Chamberlain. Hitler is there, and they agree to a peace treaty, right? So France and Britain just give up that piece of Czechoslovakia. They give it to Hitler, and Neville Chamberlain famously says, "It's peace in our time." And they all pat themselves on the back and go home. But why isn't anyone worried about this guy? Why doesn't anyone step in to stop him?
Their armies were weak because of lost war.
Okay, so their armies were weak, right? What else was going on?
I think there was rising sympathy towards the Germans because of the Treaty of Versailles.
Because of? Maybe. I'm not sure.
People that thinking was too harsh.
It's possible. I'm not sure. Did it say that in the text, or is that something else that you know?
It was about appeasement.
It was.
The reasons for appeasement.
Oh, right. Okay. We'll talk about that in a second. Aliana, what were you going to say? You had no? What's that? I thought you did. Here's another one. Ayushi says, yeah. So both Britain and France are still in an economically vulnerable or fragile state, right? So we still have this Great Depression. They still had this Great Depression on at the time, right? So these two economies are not ready to fight a war, right? They're trying to, manage their finances and recover from an economic depression, which of course affects the United States, but affected other European countries as well. Amanda, you mentioned that they're not really ready to go to war, right? So both France and Britain have kind of decreased the size of their military since the war. Militaries are expensive. And, we signed the Treaty of Versailles, right, guys? So we're not going to have any more wars, right? It's the end to all wars. So we don't need a military. So again, both countries have small militaries. Their economies are fragile at the time. They don't have a lot of money. There's this policy of appeasement. What does appeasement mean? To appease.
Like to relax.
To what?
Peace means, to get rid of something.
To get rid.
Relax or something.
To get rid of something? No, not. I think I see what you're trying to say, but not quite. What does it mean to appease?
I think it's giving in to the aggressive power to avoid conflict.
In this case, that's definitely what it means, right? Giving in to the aggressive power in order to avoid conflict, right? And that's basically what appeasement is. You give someone what they want in the hopes that they will just calm down, right? So we've all probably seen this maybe in Walmart where some kid is having a meltdown and the parent is like, okay, fine, you can get a chocolate bar, right? They appease the kid. They give the kid what the kid wants in the hope that the kid will stop having a tantrum on the ground, right? You appease this little kid. And so Britain and France are appeasing Hitler as well, right? They don't want to get into it with this guy. And they're hoping if they just kind of give him a couple of things, if they just give him what he wants, that he'll just settle down and won't cause any more trouble, right? So, okay, fine, let's just give him the Rhineland and maybe he'll be happy. Oh, okay, he just wants Czechoslovakia, guys. He just wants a little bit of Czechoslovakia. Don't worry, he'll settle down after this. We'll just give him this. We'll pat ourselves on the back, peace in our time, and then we'll all go home and everything will be fine, right? So they're kind of deluding themselves a little bit, but they also don't want to get into a major fight with this guy, and they're not ready to, right? Neither country is in a position to start a war with Germany. And again, the Great War, World War I, is not that long ago, right? So where are we now? 1933, 35? Let's say 1935. The Great War ended in 1918. That's not that long ago, right? That's in people's living memory. People have relatives who fought in the war. People remember it, right? It's not ancient history. And so nobody is interested in getting involved in another war this soon, right? Everybody still remembers how horrible the last one is. Everyone's still trying to recover from it economically, never mind, sort of mentally and emotionally, but people are trying to recover from it still. And now this guy's starting trouble in Europe again, and everyone's like, look, it's not worth fighting over. Just give him the Rhineland, give him the Sudetenland. We don't want to get involved in a conflict, right? But unfortunately, as we know, there's going to be a point where they're not going to be able to put their head in the sand on this. They're going to have to intervene and stop him, because he's not just looking for the Rhineland and the Sudetenland, right? He wants so much more. So yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Because Britain and France have an opportunity to intervene to stop him early, but they don't do it, right? They're not interested in challenging him, and so they appease him. They give him what he wants in the hopes that he will settle down, stop having a tantrum, and just eat his chocolate bar, right? But that's not what's going to happen.
So there was something else they said, that though Britain and France were democratic countries that yielded to the will of the public,
Mm-hmm.
and the public wasn't pro-intervening, whatever. They just didn't want their countries to go anything against Germany.
Yeah, so both countries, and the United States is very much like this at the time too, because of the Great Depression, because they are trying to rebuild their economies, because of their experience in World War I. What's that? Japan, yeah. Nobody's really interested in becoming involved in kind of larger affairs, right? Everyone is just kind of inwardly focused. They're isolationist. They're just worried about what's happening in their own country. They don't want to deal with other countries right now because they're just not in a place to do it economically and mentally. And so, yeah, the public doesn't support it either. The public is like, we have to defend Czechoslovakia, right? The British public is not interested in that, right? They're more interested in jobs and the economy and things like that. They don't care about Czechoslovakia. Sorry, Czechoslovakia, but they just don't care about it right now. And so politicians are willing to just kind of give Hitler what he wants in the hopes that he will go away. But of course, he's not going to go away, right? Okay, you want to take a little break? Breaky? Sure? Whatevs? Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back in 10 minutes and we'll review this, and then we'll talk about some propaganda. Okay, ready, Shreddies? 10 minutes is up. It's time to get back at it. Now, before we move on, I wanted to ask you, because I was just looking at the textbook here, and there was a few questions under critical analysis. And we were just talking about appeasement and what it is, and of course we know that this strategy is not going to work, right? We know that just giving Hitler the Rhineland or the Sudetenland is not going to be enough to satisfy him. We know he has much bigger plans for Germany and for Europe and who knows what else. And so the question is appeasement a valid strategy? Now, we know in hindsight that it's not, right? We know that it doesn't work in this case. But what would be an argument? What would be an argument for appeasement? Why would you want to appease a country that behaves in the way that Germany does? Again, even though we know that it doesn't work in this case, why might you want to do it?
They might bring trouble.
Because what?
They might bring trouble.
Give me a little more than that. Who might bring what kind of trouble?
So it was like delaying the inevitable. They knew that something bad was going to happen. They just weren't ready for it.
But do you? Because we know now, but in 1933, did they know that eventually they were going to have to fight a war with this guy?
I think it's a gamble. Like you just hope, you give them what they want and hope they won't ask for more.
Yeah, that you are gambling that it's not going to get worse, right? What else can we say? Why would you want to appease a country like this?
Just to make the allies with them, like they don't fight.
Okay, so you might want to ally with them, or you might not want to fight with them. Amanda, what were you going to say?
I was saying to give yourself time to, because in this case, it was giving the person time to react.
Right. So you might not be in a position to get into a conflict with this country, right? So you might just appease them to buy a little time so you can get prepared. What else? Other reasons why you might appease a country like this?
To gain something. They just don't want to get into a fight.
Well, they clearly don't, right? Is everything worth getting into a fight over?
Some things are, those things are not.
How some things are, some things are not. How do you determine what's worth fighting for in this case? So let's take the Rhineland, for instance, okay? So Hitler moves into the Rhineland. Is it worth starting a conflict over? Why not?
Well, because politically that land does belong to Germany, and we just told them don't put your military in it. It's still theirs. You may work in it, you may take whatever is inside it, but it's still theirs. And you know that if you got into a fight against them right now, your country will just collapse economically and by any way.
Okay.
So you know it's just not worth the risk.
Okay. So you're saying that it's just a little part of Germany. It belongs to them anyway. Is this a big deal? But what about Czechoslovakia? That is a sovereign country, and another country came in and took it over with their military. How do you decide whether that's worth it or not?
One thing that they said in the documentary was that they took both Austria and Czechoslovakia without firing a single round. So they kind of assassinated the political leaders, making the two countries just give in to Germany. So no fight was fought. As by the way, France and Britain would see it, it's like, well, they just got into Germany. It's like, okay, you're the boss.
Yeah, they just wanted it, but they are violating an international treaty, right? There is a treaty that says that Germany and Austria cannot reunite, right? No matter what. It doesn't matter if there's, bullying or assassinations, or even if they want to get together, they're not allowed to, right? Czechoslovakia is a sovereign country, right? What would it be like if the United States says, you know what, actually, we just want the lower mainland, so we're going to roll our military in here and take it? Is that okay, just because they want it? Canada wants it too. They can take Saskatchewan if they want, or Manitoba, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, we love you.
They said that the people of Austria and Czechoslovakia were like, okay, yay, Germany came in, because they were kind of in ruins. And when Germany came in, they just had on like saviors. So when the people are okay with them being annexed by another power, there's nothing left for a third party to do.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure how the public necessarily felt about, Austria. I don't know, maybe, right? The two countries have always had a closer relationship, so who knows? But I mean, Hitler had some pretty choice words for the Czechs, right? In the video, he said, he said that you can tell by the way their mustache droops that their origin is Mongol, which is ridiculous and, racially insensitive and racist. But yeah, he has no love for the Czechs, and I don't know if the Czechs had any love for him. But even so, you're violating an international agreement, right? You can't just roll in and take over because you want something. And you can't even roll in and take it even if it used to belong to you, because there's an agreement, right? The US can't roll in here and take Vancouver, even if they want it, because it's not theirs, right? International law dictates that it is part of Canada. So why is it not worth intervening when Hitler rolls into Czechoslovakia and violates an international treaty? Or when he unites with Austria, he violates an international treaty. Why not hold him to account?
Again, you have countries on the verge of collapse. Risk it for another one. It doesn't really make sense.
Let me bring this into the present here. So recently, China was able to get a security law passed in Hong Kong, so that gives the Chinese government wide, sweeping powers in Hong Kong to detain anyone who appears to be an enemy of the state. So if you are pro-democracy, if you protest, if you speak out against the government, you can be arrested by Chinese authorities. And so the Chinese said they weren't going to do that, right? The Chinese, there's an international agreement that the Chinese agreed to, saying that they would not interfere in Hong Kong's democracy, that there would be one country and two systems, right? But China has decided that that international treaty is not that important to them, and they're going to move in and do what they want anyway, despite what Hong Kong seems to want and despite international law. Yet no one has stopped them. Why? We've appeased them, if you will, right? We've said, Canada said we're very critical of what China is doing, and maybe China should rethink it. But that's all we said, right? And words are, unless you're going to back up your words with something else, words are useless. And we haven't backed it up. So why are we appeasing China? Why are we letting them violate an international agreement? This is their Sudetenland.
Well, now you might say that there's no country on the verge of collapse, but again, if you waited, how do you want to back it up? Sanctions? Yeah, that's kind of not really all that useful. They do put pressure, but they don't really make governments eat. We can see that. Blockading China, that'll lead to a war. And then you want to wait it. Is it worth it to just out of there and lose thousands of soldiers.
Okay, so you're saying basically that there's nothing we can do, right?
There's
So
nothing we can do that won't cost us a lot of lives.
right, and so I guess it comes down to the question then is, what is worth fighting for, right? If there is no, if the only way we can intervene when people, if the only way we can make people follow international treaties is with force, what's worth fighting for? And how do we decide that?
If, for instance, tomorrow China attacked Mongolia, which is its northern neighbor, and the Mongols were like, no, get out, then that is worth fighting for. A country is attacking another, the one that is being attacked is not cool with that. So they ask for a third party to intervene, and then you can intervene, and that's kind of their fight.
Okay, so you've created an example here where China invades Mongolia. Mongolia says, no, we don't want you here, and so you're saying that that is worthy of intervention?
That is definitely.
Okay. What is the distinction between that scenario and the one going on with China and Hong Kong? Because I think Hong Kong has pretty clearly stated they don't want China meddling around in their democracy. And yet, China has done so anyway, and nobody has stepped in.
Hong Kong is a part of China.
Well, it depends who you ask.
Politically, it is part of China. It does have its own independent system, but it's still part of
Which China promised to respect.
But we all know promises and dictators.
Well, yeah, we do, but again, that's the thing is you're writing it off as that's just the way things are. And what I'm trying to argue is that, or what I'm trying to ask is, why do we make the decisions that we do, right? Why do we appease Hitler? Why do we let China violate an international agreement, right? Which is, again, not the only international agreement they've violated, but we'll just leave that aside for now. Why do we let them get away with this in the same way that we let Hitler get away with Czechoslovakia? And when is it worth stepping in? And is it better to step in earlier than later, right? Certainly, I think in this case with Hitler, it definitely would have been better to step in earlier because he wasn't quite as strong. However, as Amanda's pointed out, the other powers weren't quite ready to deal with him yet. But maybe as a united group they could have, right? France and Britain and the US, they probably could have dealt with him early on as a coordinated group, but they don't, right? So again, I'm not sure there's an easy answer here, but I just want you to think about, it's very easy to look at the history books and say, oh, they appeased Hitler. What a bunch of fools, right? They should have known better because he went on to do horrible things. And what I'm trying to point out is that, sometimes we do that today. And I think in the case of Hong Kong, we have done that. But the question is, should we have? Should we have intervened? Should we have had a stronger reaction to what China has done so far? Is the outcome of this going to be really bad for all of us? Or is it just going to, are they just going to be happy with it and that's the end of it, right? And like Amanda said, it's a gamble, right? You hope that letting them away with it will not lead to a worse outcome, but you never really know. Now we do because it's in the book, right? But as these things are unfolding, you never really know what's going to happen. And maybe we'll find out in 30 years when your kids study history, maybe they'll look back on this passing of the security law in Hong Kong and say, wow, that was where the world had an opportunity to step in and they didn't, right? Or it may wind up in the history books as just a little footnote and nobody will pay attention to it again. It's hard to know, right? But I'm just trying to draw a little bit of comparison between those two scenarios and ask you, when is it worth intervening, and is appeasement the best option all the time?
So back in these two examples we have, back in the history, when the Germans then went on to take Poland, we see that France invaded a part of Germany. And now in our day, if one day this Chinese Navy go on and take Taiwan, then that will probably get some US stuff happening around there.
And I suspect China is playing it very cautiously, and I assume that they are, I kind of feel that that's their end game. That's what they want. They want to be in possession of both Taiwan and Hong Kong, but they know better than to just go and take them, right? They're going to do it a little bit at a time so that people don't freak out, and eventually they're going to get what they want if they just be patient and they time it properly, right? They timed the passing of this national security law when everyone was focused on COVID and nobody was paying attention to Hong Kong, and that's when they did it, right? So I think they're pretty methodical, they're pretty strategic, and they're just going to do it slowly. And I think eventually they're going to get there, but they're not going to just roll in, with warships and take it. That's going to cause a fuss, right? But I think they're going to get there. Okay, so that should get me censored in China anyway, for my YouTube channel. Nobody in China will ever see my YouTube channel again. Okay, very quickly. We talked about Hitler's new order here, right? They want economic self-sufficiency. They want German hegemony. Have you ever heard the word hegemony before? Hegemony, it kind of means power over, or to be in a position of control over. So they want German hegemony over Europe. That's one thing that we didn't talk about. He wanted to rationalize agriculture and industry, right? So he wanted agriculture and industry to be centrally planned so he could sort of move workers and resources around in a way that was the most efficient and that was result in kind of the most production, which is, again, kind of a socialist idea, right? Where the government is kind of controlling industry to that degree. And so, again, he's got some right-wing tendencies, Hitler, some pretty extreme right-wing tendencies. But that's a little more of a left-wing idea, right? The degree to which the government would be involved in the economy and industry. But again, he's going to do that in order to increase Germany's productivity. And he's basically running the country as if they are already at war, right? Because that's often what happens in wartime, right? The government takes control of industry and tells it what to do. And so Hitler is basically running the country as if it's already at war, even though they're not yet. We answered this question here, that how would people be affected, and all non-Germans would be removed from Germany for the most part. Those Germans who were not living in Germany would be encouraged to return. And in terms of this hierarchy of the ethnicities, the further down you were, kind of the darker your outcome would be. And people at the bottom, so Jewish people, Roma people, people with physical or mental disabilities, homosexuals, all of these people would had no place in Germany's. No, they weren't, but most of them didn't get sent to a death camp.
Yeah, they just got some hormone treatment.
It's true. It was certainly not acceptable in really any Western country to be homosexual at the time. But regardless, they're going to wind up in the same place as Jewish people and people with mental or physical disabilities. Nuremberg Decrees, 1935, they're decreed by Hitler. And here's the two laws. And so this is where there's a little more detail than in the text. So one of them is the law for the protection of German blood and German honor. And so that forbids any kind of marital sexual contact between Germans and Jewish people, right? So he's trying to physically separate these two groups, but he's also trying to make sure that they do not interbreed, right? Because, you know, people do that, right? They fall in love and then things happen, right? So Hitler is making that illegal, right? And he's also passed this Reich citizenship law. So only those with German blood, German ethnicity, are eligible to be citizens, right? So those are the ones who are going to have rights. Nobody else does. So your rights in society are purely based on your race or ethnicity in Hitler's world, right? Yeah, and those get expanded a little bit later to include Roma people. Do you know anything about Roma? Roma people, gypsies?
Seems like they live non-civilized environments, like in tents or something outside cities.
Yeah, I don't know their sort of original origin, but yeah, in Europe historically they are an ethnic group, and they are kind of nomadic. They do move around. They live in temporary areas, but they've been subjected to a lot of prejudice and discrimination over the years as well. Right, so we talked about this Kristallnacht thing. There's the assassination of the German diplomat by this young Jewish man, and of course the Nazis kind of lose their marbles over this. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of vandalism, there's a lot of rape, and at the end of it, Jewish people are fined for all the damage that they did not cause, and they lose a number of their access to public services, which is important as well. And then finally, we were just talking about this policy of appeasement, of course. Great Britain and France are not too interested in being involved. And of course, in hindsight, it's very easy to determine that, oh gosh, this might have been a good opportunity to intervene. But again, it's really easy to see those looking back, and it's hard to tell at the time, right? Yeah, I'm just going to jump ahead here. Okay, propaganda, Nazi propaganda. So propaganda is pretty widely used by all governments to some degree. Mostly in the West, the propaganda you'll find is pretty tame. But again, it's in the government's interest to try to convince people of certain things, or to view issues in certain ways. And so sometimes propaganda is just a little bit soft, or it presents the government or the people in a certain light. But sometimes it can be incredibly negative and incredibly destructive, right? And so we definitely see that in Hitler's Germany. This is what he says. He says, propaganda is a means to an end. Its purpose is to lead the people to an understanding that will allow it to willingly and without internal resistance devote itself to the tasks and goals of superior leadership, right? So again, this is the opposite of democracy. The ideas aren't coming from the bottom. The ideas are coming from Hitler, and he just has to convince everybody that that is what we're doing, right? So here's a little bit of a propaganda image. So this is a fundraising poster for the Hitler Youth, and so here's this girl, a member of the Hitler Youth, asking for people to donate money to build youth hostels and homes, right? So what is this image meant to do? How is it supposed to make you feel? What are you supposed to learn from this reasonably simple image?
You feel pity for this woman, should help.
Oh, okay, so you might feel like you should help her, right? You should put a little coin in the tin, right? What else might you feel?
And they support. They're nice people.
Who's nice? Who's nice people? So this little girl is nice? Who's nice? You're right. Yeah, the Nazis are nice. Yeah. So here's this Hitler Youth. She looks quite pleasant, right? She looks like this friendly young girl, right? She's got a smile. What's she doing? She's doing something quite generous and altruistic, right? She's collecting money to build youth hostels. It's a nice thing to do, right? What else? It's difficult to look at, right? Because when you see the swastika there, you know, we immediately have a negative feeling about it, right? But keep in mind that at the time, the Germans wouldn't have felt that way, right? So, yeah, this kind of puts a very pleasant...
Persuading picture.
Yeah, it puts a very pleasant spin on the Nazis, right? Look at these Hitler Youth, right? The political party that's in charge of Germany, they have this kind of youth movement, and the youth are out there raising money for kids who need it, right? Doesn't that feel good? What's that? Yeah, the flowers are a nice touch, right? And again, she's this very pleasant young woman, and you want to help her, right? You want to put a coin in the tin. Notice that she's blonde-haired and blue-eyed, which you will see quite often because, of course, Hitler felt that that was kind of the ideal look for Germans, even though that's not quite how he looked. So you'll see lots of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. Oh yeah, here's another one. So German students fight for the Führer and for the people. What's that? What's what? Yeah, that's the meaning. So der Deutsche Student, the German student, kämpft for Führer and Volk. So fights for the Führer and for the people. How are you meant to feel looking at this image as a German person?
Proud, strong, and confident.
Why do you say that?
Because he's holding a flag, very proud, and then he's holding his hand.
Yeah, he looks very proud and looks very strong, right? He's standing up there in kind of a power pose. He looks like a strapping young lad, right? He looks like he works out now and again. He's got the Nazi flag with him. He's a pretty handsome looking guy, right?
The pose is like Superman.
He's not handsome?
No, he's posing like a Superman.
He's kind of got a Superman pose going on. Not a handsome guy?
Yes, he's very handsome.
He's very handsome. He's a pretty handsome guy, right? He's got some color in his face, right? He looks like he's youthful and vibrant and strong. No? Ahmad's not into him. That's okay. I think he's a pretty good-looking guy. So again, yeah, you're meant to feel power and pride and strength. And maybe if you're a student, if you're a German student, you should fight for the people and for the Führer as well, right? And then you'll be just like this guy. You'll be almost a superhero as he's posed, right? Oh, this is a good one. So
Is this the young Hitler?
I think this is all for Deutschland. I don't speak German. Es lebe Deutschland. It's all for Deutschland, all for Germany. But what's going on here?
Is this Hitler? He looks very young.
Germany, and that's a show of strength.
What's that?
It's a show of strength.
And unity, because there's a whole lot of people behind it.
Right. So here we see Hitler, right? He's leading a huge number of people behind him, right? They all have Nazi banners. He has a big Nazi banner, and he's out in front.
And the Roman eagle.
Right? We've got an eagle.
And then he has lights from God, supports from God.
Yeah, it looks like God himself is shining down on Hitler, right? Like God has said, "This is my chosen one," right? You can almost hear the voice of God in the image, right?
It seems more like he's saying, if I'm the descendants of the Romans, because of the eagle that's in the air.
Yeah, there might be a reference to the Romans as well, right? And the Romans like to, march into battle carrying their red standard with the SPQR, right? So here we see a little bit of reference to the ancient Romans, which have a proud militaristic history. We see some references to the divine, right, to God, where it looks like God himself is smiling down on Hitler. We have Hitler leading this huge group of people behind him. What's the look on Hitler's face? How does he look?
Angry, and he's the looks of a leader, let's say.
Okay, angry, and what else?
He will take the bullet for him.
Fierce.
Most of it's like a big
Determined, fierce, what? Me?
whatever.
I don't know. I don't see that from him.
He's showing a strong man, you know,
I think
for his country.
I think he looks very determined.
He's angry. Look at his eyes.
Well, yeah, look at his eyes are, focused forward. They look pretty intense. His mouth is like,
Look at his
he's determined, right? He's not like, right? He's not like that. He's not smiling. He's not yawning. He's like, we're going to do this. I am sternly leading the people forward, right? As God looks on. So this is a pretty intense image, right? Making Hitler appear as kind of the glorious leader of Germany. He's out front leading the people. God is smiling down on him. It's a pretty powerful image, right? Even though there's really no text at all, right? I think it just says everything for Germany, I think is what it says. What's that? I loved Es lebe Deutschland. Okay. For the love of Germany, for the love of, yeah, could be. Not a lot of text, right? But a lot of meaning. Oh, here's another one. So the NSDAP, so that's the Nazi Party, protects the people. Your fellow comrades need your advice and help. So join the local party organization. That's what it says in German. So what do you see here?
If I was there, I would have joined Nazis.
What's that?
If I was there in like that time, I would have joined Nazis. Because they know the posters and everything.
Because they have good artwork.
I didn't know that.
What do you see here? What are we meant to feel, and what are we meant to understand based on this image?
There is a same eagle from there.
There's an eagle.
Yeah.
Okay.
The eagle is only ever on its wings, so we could see that the Nazi Party says, "We got your back, we protect you."
Right. So the eagle is connected with Rome. It's connected with Germany, right? The traditional German flag has an eagle on it. Here, the Nazis are the eagle, right? And you can see that the eagle's kind of got its wings over this little kind of cute traditional German family, right? And the eagle is protecting them. What's the eagle look like? What's that? He's watching over them. Does he look like a fierce eagle? Yeah. Would you mess with that eagle?
Never.
You would not, right? Especially because it appears to be like 8 feet tall. I mean, that's a big eagle. I wouldn't mess with that eagle either. So yeah, we have this very kind of fierce, intense-looking eagle with his wings over this, very traditional German family, this German kind of peasant family, right? So you've got mom and dad there, 3 kids, all of them blonde-haired and blue-eyed, which is no accident. And again, how are the Nazis portrayed here? As the protectors of the people, right? Especially families, right? Especially families and young children. The Nazis are there to protect you. Is that true? Well, maybe. But didn't Hitler say in that documentary that he would, without regret, send wave after wave of young Germans into the fires of war without a single regret? I don't know. He may be protecting German families, but he also may use them to the ends of the state, right? What about this one? Behind the enemy powers, the Jews. So what's going on here?
It's turning Germans against not just the Jews, but the other countries as well.
Right. So we heard about that in the documentary, right? He said it's useful if you can take a bunch of enemies and make them seem like they're the same thing, right? And so here we have some foreign powers to Germany. We have the Soviet Union and the US and Great Britain. And who's behind them all? The Jews, right? And what?
That guy has a very ugly face.
That guy has a very ugly face. He's not an attractive fellow. And what's the look on his face? How does he look?
Suspicious, jealous.
Like he's looking down at something with hatred.
Yeah, he doesn't look very friendly. He looks like he's kind of sneaking around in the background and, kind of glaring at things, right? This is a very unfriendly, threatening, suspicious expression on the face of this person, right? So here again, even if you can't read, which as most of us I don't think can read German, even if you can't read the German, you pretty clearly get what this is about, right? You get the meaning of this even without the text. Those aren't curtains. There's symbolism happening here, right? This is actually a movie poster. So this is a German. This was a German film produced in the 1930s. It says it's a documentary film. This is a movie poster for a documentary, not a horror film. And it says The Eternal Jew. That's what the title is.
That's the weirdest haircut ever.
It's a, well, what are we looking at?
Does he have a horn?
No, I don't think there's any horns. There's a hat. But what are we looking at here? What's the symbol? Yeah, that's the star. That's the Star of David, right? And so it's symbolic of the Jewish faith and the Jewish people and the Jewish nation. You'll find it on the flag of Israel in the middle, and so, yeah, that's a symbol of Judaism and Jewish people. So here we see it on this guy's forehead. So this guy is a Jewish person. Does this look like a normal Jewish person?
No.
No. What does it look like? He's ugly, he's deformed, he looks angry. He almost looks like a devil of some sort or some sort of gargoyle or creature, right? So, and this is a documentary. This is not a horror film, right? So here we see, the Germans portraying the Jews not even as people, right? This looks like a monster of some sort, right? This looks like some sort of creature from a horror film, right? And this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll let you go because we'll talk about it tomorrow. But this is often what you see in the very early stages of a genocide, is you see that one side, the group in power, dehumanizes the other, right? And so it's useful if you're going to treat other people in an awful way, or if you're going to execute them or whatever. It's useful to dehumanize them, to make them seem less than human or more than human, because people don't like to hurt other humans instinctively. And Beatrice is looking at me like, yes, they do. But usually it's more difficult for us to hurt each other. And so it's much easier to hurt each other if we don't see each other as humans. And so here, we're not looking at a representative image of a Jewish person. We're not even looking at a human being, right? We're looking at some sort of creature, some sort of gargoyle, and they're eternal, right? It's like they never die, right? There's some sort of mythical, magical, frightening creature, not a human, right? Something to fear, something to be repulsed by or revolted by, right? They're not humans. They're something else, right? That's the message here. Okay, that is all the time we have. If you haven't submitted your paper to me, it better come in pretty quickly. But online people, thank you for your participation today. It was good. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.